What's up, and welcome to another week of the Grind Line podcast. It's Ryan, not Greg. A little bit of a curveball there for everybody. Greg is out due to the bubonic plague at home, aka children. So it is myself and Tyler. Tyler, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad to be back talking hockey with you guys, even though my baseball season has
Singular, you
started.
mean?
So, yes, you, Ryan, and Greg, who will listen to this. But yes, glad to be talking hockey with you, and then most importantly, our fans. So looking forward to getting into some of the nitty gritty that what we have scheduled for this podcast here.
I was gonna say you been on a raging baseball boner the past couple days. You're wearing your Red Sox hoodie right now for those that aren't watching. So
Yeah, well, you know what? I got it back from my parents' house. I was kind of going through some of the shit that I still have there. I'm like, oh, this is actually really nice because it fits big and I can just wear it around the house.
is that a Majestic brand one?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, those are comfy. Those are warm sweatshirts, though. Is it cold in Boston right now?
It was warm today. It's cooler again tonight. So, dude, it's like 20 to 25 degrees in the morning, and then by the time we get to the afternoon, it's like 55, 60. Today was 65. Like, you got to be kidding me, dude. Like,
see, today it got mid 50s. The overnight's supposed to be 48. A couple days ago, it was like that though, where it got real cold. And like the other day, I think it was Sunday morning, or it was like 29 degrees out when we woke up.
right now,
like,
it says it's 51. I think it feels more like 45 out because I have shorts on and then this giant hoodie. But anyways, like I said, yeah, I do have the baseball thing going, but I've been paying attention to the Wings, as much as I can.
Not
and
done yet. Got to.
Michigan's in the Frozen Four too, so I'm excited.
When's the Frozen Four? It feels like forever since
Thursday.
They got 2 weeks off for that.
They get a week. Yeah, they get a week in between.
I gotcha. Yeah. But anyways, all right. Well, since we last talked, the Wings have been on maybe to some people's chagrin, a bit of a roll here. They've won 3 of 4. Beaten up on Pittsburgh. They beat Carolina. We're not going to talk about Winnipeg. And then they came out and made Toronto look silly. Are you for or against that right now?
I mean, okay, so here's where I kind of get into it. I'm for it because we've kind of talked about it ad nauseum that we're not getting the first overall pick. I guess where it kind of gets a little gray is like, okay, if you wanted Adam Fantilli or you wanted, Matej Michkov or one of those guys, like, you still want to be in the top 5, and I guess it still is possible, but it's certainly going to be harder, especially given the way that they're winning, and they're winning again tonight against the Canadians. So, I don't love it, but I don't hate it either because you do have the young guys up, which we're going to talk about at a later moment here in this podcast. But
totally.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. Like, if Edvinson's up and he's playing the way he's playing, and we have other guys that have come up and have done a good job, who I'm not going to mention just yet, but I mean that's huge because. Honestly, like, yeah, you want to get the highest pick possible if you're not going to make the playoffs, but
sure,
they're still technically not eliminated, right? Like,
no, the biggest thing I think I saw today is they had to lose with another combination of someone else winning. I want to say Pittsburgh, and then they'd be officially out. But I don't know. I don't think them winning officially takes them out yet because they've got 5 games, 10 possible points. Let's see, Pittsburgh and the Islanders. I mean, it's unless each team, everyone else in front of them loses and they went out, then they're in. Let's see what happens. It's crazy, but it's not going to happen. So they're within a game or 2 of their fate being officially decided.
We still have Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Dallas, at Carolina, at Tampa. But I mean, you never know. I said,
I can tell you right now that I don't have faith in the Buffalo game because they've looked like complete shit against them all season.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is going to be out for blood after that last game. Like I mentioned, they beat up on Pittsburgh 7-4. Dallas, they're on a roll. They got Jason Robertson, their first 100-point scorer since they moved to Dallas. So they're terrifying. Carolina and Tampa, that's self-explanatory. So it's going to be a rough last 5 games potentially. But we also thought the last couple of games were going to be rough because, again, they were playing Pittsburgh, Carolina, and Toronto. So, we saw what they got from Winnipeg. That's another playoff contending team. So I don't know. It could go either way. I think for unfortunate, I don't want to say a lot or majority of folks, but there are people out there that don't want them to keep winning and they want to see that percentage drop. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, like, if you're not getting the first overall pick or you're not getting the second overall pick or you're not going to be in that top 5, then the losing, I guess I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this, but like the cost of losing or the cost of winning, I don't think is going to outweigh like the fact that your younger guys are getting some experience in quote unquote important games. These games aren't garbage time yet. You know what I mean? Once they are officially eliminated, those will be more quote unquote garbage time games. But at this point, on April 4th, 2023, the Detroit Red Wings are still not eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs.
thank you.
They're
You made
going
the point
to be
that I was going to make is that when's the last time we've had, now I get it. It's not a victory because they're not in the playoffs, but,
and they're not really in the race either.
and I hate going with the moral victory thing because that's just a cheap way to go about it, I think. But we haven't been able to say that they're not eliminated from the playoffs prior to April in years. So that's a step forward in its own right. Now, yes, again, cap or the draft lottery, blah, blah. We'll see what happens. If it happens, great. I'm not putting all my eggs into that basket saying that they're going to somehow jump to the number 1 pick and get Connor Bedard. If you want to go with that, have at it. I'm not going to stop you. But whatever happens, happens. If it's not the top 2 picks, we're going to bitch about it anyways because that's how we can do it. So,
well, I will say one thing, and I guess this is something that if they do go on to lose a bunch more games, or 5 of their last,
drop their last 5.
Yeah, lose their last 5 games. Could you see a situation where they drop to the number 7 overall pick and then you trade up to 2 or 3?
I'm not.
Yzerman didn't rule it out. I mean,
no, I mean, he's going to have 2 picks in the top 20 potentially. So,
yep.
I mean, unless the Islanders do something crazy and make that jump ahead a couple spots, like right now, their pick is sitting at number 17 overall. If there's not taking the lottery into consideration, Detroit would hold the 11th and 17th picks right now. So
could you package both of those and move up into the top 5?
Possibly. I mean, it's hard to play the guessing game with what Yzerman may or may not do because more often than not, you're going to be wrong. You can maybe get kind of close, but if you're one of those that can Nostradamus what Steve Yzerman's doing, you need to be hired by the organization.
I agree.
So now to that point though, and I know we're kind of getting off the way from what we were going to talk about, but to me, and I had an interesting conversation not too long ago with Mario. I want to see that first pick made. I would also like to see that second first round pick or next year's first round pick be in play to make this team better for a now player. Someone that's not just a fill that you could likely get in free agency. And I don't want to say fill, but someone that's not going to necessarily, that's someone that's going to push the needle, maybe get you a top 6 goal scorer with a first round pick. Maybe you get the rights to a Timo Meier. I doubt it. That's a best case scenario. Oh my God, this shit just happened. But that's like a for instance that I'm trying to make here. If you got those picks available, I feel like this is the season where you're going to see, this is me assuming or hoping maybe a little bit, that you're going to see some movement of picks for players, not picks for moving up in picks or things of that nature.
And the other thing you need to take into consideration is that the cap's not going up too much and the Wings are going to still have a lot of cap space.
Yep.
So could you see a scenario where a team's up against the cap and they're like, oh, well, we need to trade a William Nylander. Oh, wait, we don't really want to trade him in division, but we could trade him in division and get out of the cap that William Nylander, I think he's making 6.8 something a year. So, I mean, could you see a scenario like that? There are other teams. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't really think of one in particular, but there are teams.
Colorado's in a tough spot right now. They've got a lot of guys coming off of contract, but you've now got to pay Nathan McKinnon an extra $6 million a year. So are you looking at, are they going to offload into Shushkin? Are they going to offload Mikko Rantanen? I doubt it. But those are things to take a look at, because right now Gabe Landeskog is on your LTIR. That's $7 million that's going to come off the cap. That's going to re-hit what you've got to pay out guys. And they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pending UFAs at forward, 2 more that are RFAs. So they've got guys they've got to pay as well. That's another team that maybe you look at Steve talking to. Now,
I know Greg brought up the Washington Capitals, and the Capitals have kind of faded, and it kind of seems like it's the Ovechkin thing, and really not a whole lot more in terms of like pushing for a Stanley Cup. I'm not saying Kuznetsov, because he has his off ice issues and stuff like that. It seems like he could be so much better than he is. He kind of seems like at times he's
there,
the best player there, or a potential top 20 player in the NHL. And then other times it just looks like he's disinterested, almost like Evgeny Malkin looked early in his career. But Kuznetsov is 30 years old now, and he's got 3 more years at 7.8. So I'm not saying bringing Kuznetsov, but
2 more
bring in Tom Wilson.
Wilson's interesting because now you're potentially looking at, because Kuzi's got 2 more years after this year's up. Tom Wilson's only got 1 more year, but I can tell you right now, I'm not sending a first round pick to get him. That's if I'm using now. I get it that it's going to be a mid first pick. If it was this year's, next year's probably potentially the same, depending on how this team progresses. But Tom Wilson's not necessarily a guy I want to make that pick on. And now, could that be the asking price? Sure. I don't know. That one's hard to swallow, hard pill to swallow right there.
You'd have to hope that there's a situation where there's an extension in place. But then again, he's 29.
Yeah, but for how long? Because he is
29.
He just turned 29 a week ago. Now, I'm not saying that's old. He's younger than me. Is he just older than you? Does he fit the window? Maybe, but are you going to be signing him? Is he going to want a long-term contract? Because if that's the case, then you're kind of wasting capital and time at that point. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. But going back to my original point, I would much prefer to see one of those top picks maybe used to bring in a goal-scoring type player. And Tom Wilson, he brings more of the all-around game. But if you can bring in the likes of a Timo Meier, I'm not saying that's who I want them to go for. But that's just the simple comparison I'm trying to make.
They could.
I mean, he still needs a contract. But we'll see.
William Nylander.
Nylander would be an ideal situation, because I don't know what the hell Toronto's planning on doing. He's going to be asking for more money after next season because his expires as well. And you're going to have to pay Austin Matthews. So good luck.
Yeah, good luck. That's their problem, not ours. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of situations that you could see going awry. New Jersey is another one.
They extended Hughes. They got that taken care of pretty quickly.
They got
for a good price point.
So they're not a team that I would.
They're going to be looking at having to extend Jesper Bratt. Are they bringing back Tatar? They got to figure out what they're going to do with Timo Meier. They got Eric Halla. Now, granted, he's a little bit older. Shrengovich, he's had a good year. There's guys that they're going to have to end up paying. Yeah, Dawson Mercer, he has 1 year left on his entry level deal. How's his contract going to play out? They gotta lock down their defense. They've got Severson and Graves to get under contract. So there's going to be some finagling with them that's going to have to take place as well.
Well, I guess one team you could look at too is the Oilers. That's another team.
All the teams that are basically playoff bound are ones that you can look at and be like, there's guys that Yzerman could probably go get. This team will be immediately better.
You could really piss off Leafs Nation and sign Michael Bunting in free agency.
Are you going to piss off Leafs Nation, or are they going to be like, he wasn't that great, and then they'll be happy about it, and then you'll piss off Red Wings Nation instead because you got the old man Bunting to be your new bitch boy? Because speaking of Bunting, that's going to take us over into probably one of the highlights of the year, other than Edvinsson making his way and making his NHL debut. Marco Kasper officially made his NHL debut against Michael Bunting and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I got to tell you, I'm excited. The Wings, the future of this team has finally made it to Detroit. Now, there's guys that are in Grand Rapids that, yes, I get it. There's several players that we're excited for that haven't made their way up yet. Calm down. Don't yell at me for that. We had on Saturday night Edvinson, Berggren, Raymond, Sider, and Kasper all on the ice the other night. There was 4 of them on the ice at one point when they got into a fantastic scrum, and where you could argue that Stevie Y's goon squad had arrived. And the person that led off that scrum, Marco Kasper, got into it right in front of the net and then let it around the net. I think it was Liljegren that he started chirping and getting up on his shit. And then that just swarmed. Edmondson, Sider, they came in late. Bunting was out there, ended up leading to him. People say he spit. I still don't know if he did that or not at the feet of Simon Edmondson. It kind of looked like it. Don't really know for sure, but because he doesn't shut his goddamn mouth, he got a 10-minute misconduct. Didn't get the game. He did come back in the third, but he got kind of benched and didn't really see the ice until the end of the game. But the highlight of that night, though, other than the Wings winning 5-2, I think was definitely Marco Kasper. That you could tell coming in the first period. I mean, he had his water legs. He wasn't quite sure. He was skating. He was kind of just going through the motions, if you will, in that first period. And that's to be fully expected. He is the first 18-year-old skater to play for the Red Wings since Marty Lapointe back in 1991. So that tells you how things have progressed, better or worse, for Detroit over all these years. Because you think back to 91, they were in a similar situation to arguably what they are right now, and starting to turn things around. But I thought as a whole, for me, watching the way he progressed through that game, he got stronger and more confident, especially in the second period, because he started putting the body on more. He wasn't afraid to mix it up or kind of throw a little shoulder into somebody. At one point, I think it was in the third period, he pissed off TJ Brody and took a nice slash to the back of the knee. Kasper kind of took a run in him along the Maple Leafs goal line, missed him. Brody took exception to it, came around, slashed him in the back of the leg. Kasper skated around the net and then got in his face about it. So you see that he's already not backing down to seasoned NHL players. And that is the shit disturber thing that I think we've talked about over the last however many months with him, and something that Detroit has lacked, because the skill's there. The playmaking is there. There's several times that I thought he was actually going to get a goal, or he was setting up a great play cross ice. Like, the vision is what seemed to be on point, and he was confident with the puck. And I think for what we saw out of him, I get it. It was one game. He hasn't played since. He's kind of banged up, it sounds like, but there's talent there, and it's exciting because that's where this future is heading.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that, like, it's one thing to hear about these guys. It's one thing to see the highlights. It's one thing to see them.
Oh, there's plenty of them too.
The SHL or wherever, but it's a whole nother ball game when they lace up and wear the winged wheel on their chest. I mean, honestly, this is what we've been waiting for, right? We're not quite there just yet, but you can start to see, the light at the end of the tunnel, or whatever adage you want to use. You can just start to see it. You can start to see where it all fits together. Like, for a long time, you're like, okay, so we have Larkin,
Bert,
potentially Bert, a whole lot of not much
endless
going forward.
Guys that we thought were going to be really good, then weren't good, and then they got traded, or they're just hurt.
But then you get Sider into the fold, and now you got Edvinson. So you got two real stalwarts on defense, or potential stalwarts on defense. You have Wallman, who has kind of come out of nowhere, really, and he's been fantastic all season long, and he was last year as well.
Yep.
Joe Veleno's kind of coming into his own. I know he's not going to ever probably live
3 points in 5 games. He's got a goal tonight too against the Habs.
I don't think he's ever going to live up to that, high draft pick kind of thing. But you know what?
No,
at the end of it, he was a 2nd round pick, right?
He was 30th or 32nd overall. I think between 30 and 34. He was into the first, early second. I think early second is where he ended up.
I think it was the early second,
because he was one of the few guys that had exceptional status in the CHL, and then for whatever reason it just didn't live up to it, and people started to see that. So that's why he dropped in the draft to Detroit, and Detroit was able to snag him.
And honestly, I mean, you know what? You're gonna as team building comes together and you start to build this team for the playoffs and all that, sometimes the guys that you draft high like that, or draft in the second round like that, if for them to become at least even a player on a team that plays a decent amount and is even at least a third liner, I mean, that's huge. Like, because what is the stats? I mean, most players that are drafted in the first 2 rounds, some play in the NHL and some really don't.
Oh yeah, I mean, I forget you talking about the percentages. It's not high. Even if you're a top 10 pick, like your odds are obviously better, but I'd have to look it up to see what those numbers are typically. I know Prashant has done a really good visual for that, but and Veleno, by the way, he was first round 30th overall. That's what I thought.
Oh, so he was a second first round pick in that draft then, because I forget who the first one was, but yeah. So anyways, yeah, I mean, Veleno's kind of coming into his own. Raymond's another high pick, and he's been really good recently. So, I mean, you can start to see it all come together. On forward, you have Larkin. Going forward, you have Kasper, you have Bergeron, Raymond, Veleno's probably part of that as well. And then on defense, obviously, you have, Evanson, Seider, and then, unfortunately, Ben Sherratt right now. But, going forward, Jake Wallman, obviously. And then, you do have the young guys in the minor leagues that are in the
Wallander,
AHL.
you've got Sabrango potentially.
Like
Wallander 20, Sabrango 21, Johansson 22. So there's Tuomisto got brought back over. We'll see.
Oh, and by the way, Sebastian Costa just lights it up in the ECHL right now. So
and he's still on a roll there. I mean, he's kind of, after their win streak, he's kind of taken a step back. I don't want to say step back, but the walleye have kind of come back to reality is the way I'll put it. But no, to your point, there's a lot of young guys that, and even Yzerman has made mention of it, that could be fighting for a spot next year, particularly on defense. But there's guys like Soderblom. The odds are good that he's going to be a full-time NHLer next season. Amadeus Lombardi has been lighting it up in Flint. So where are we going to see him come to Grand Rapids next season? I think that'd be fantastic. Ross Hannes, once he gets back healthy. And then Carter Mazer. He's had a good start down in Grand Rapids. He's looking confident in all young, all 21 and under. That's what's important. Now that's why I go back to what we were talking about earlier, though. Do we use that other, Yzerman. Does Yzerman use that other first round pick to now go get a forward or even a defenseman to complement what is being built right now? So, and a lot of those names we just mentioned, does someone also become expendable in a trade like this?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the other thing to think about, because we're starting to get to that territory where you mentioned it at the start. We're not eliminated officially from the playoffs yet. The expectation for next season, much like the Detroit Lions, this team needs to make the playoffs. Now, the Lions, I think, have a little bit higher expectation because of the way they ended the season, but I'm not expecting Detroit to come out, the Red Wings, that is, and win the division. But you want to see this team fighting for that wild card spot and making it and making noise.
But like, if you use the comparison to the Lions, you don't have potentially Aaron Rodgers leaving the division. You don't have Minnesota Vikings kind of paring it back a little bit. You don't have Chicago. I guess Chicago's probably going to get a little bit better. But I mean, at the end of the day, Detroit could end up being the best team in the NFC Central, right? Is that what it's called? No, NFC North.
NFC North, yeah.
But then if you look at like the Wings,
hockey-wise,
if you look at the Wings division, the Atlantic, Toronto's not getting any worse. No. I know that their cap situation still is what it is, but as long as they have Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Morgan Riley, I mean, they're going to be a really good team. Boston, we don't know about yet. We don't. No,
we thought they were going to be shit this year, at least at the start, because of the injuries, and then they came out and have dominated ever since. Now, does that speak to the coaching change?
It could.
Very likely.
Yeah, very likely.
So, and they've got, really, they got to figure out what they're going to do with Bergeron. Are they bringing back Bertuzzi? So that's a team that you look at. Can you bring somebody in? I was hoping Pasta was going to make the free agency. That could be someone that Detroit could try to make an offer to. I would have paid him that $11 million to be on this Red Wings team. I don't care if people will be like, oh, it's way too much. You want to get better. That's the type of player you want to have on your team.
Those are the difference makers that more times than not, you have to draft. You have to draft guys like Moritz Seider. You have to draft guys like Simon Edvinsson. You have to draft guys like Dylan Larkin. And I forget exactly who it was. I think it was Craig Button said that Detroit would regret getting rid of Dylan Larkin because they're going to spend 10 years trying to find another Dylan Larkin,
who right now is at 70, as before coming in tonight, was at 76 points in 75 games. He's
and by the way, 30 goals.
Another 30-goal season. Another one. That's his third, correct?
Mm-hmm.
He's on a select list of Red Wings players to include the likes of Datsuk, Zetterberg, Yzerman. Just crazy. And he's doing this with a middle-of-the-road to bad team.
Way lesser of a roster than those guys ever had.
So you tell me that...
Except for Yzerman, maybe.
Like, the fact that I got told that he wouldn't be a second-line center on teams before, like, that just... If you think that and you had this guy that's a point per game player on a team that's like this, I got nothing for you at this point.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those Steve Yzerman early years, like 83, 84, 85, those years were not very good. Those were still the dead wing teams. So Steve Yzerman and Bob Probert and those guys, they basically carried those teams, right? So if I mean, obviously I'm not old enough to remember, but from what I've seen, those teams were not very good. And so
1984, 83-84 season, Yzerman's first year. This is per Hockey Reference. They had 69 points.
There you go.
And the leading scorer was Yzerman with 87 points. Next was Ivan Boldarev at 83 points. I can't even pronounce his name.
Ron Duguay?
John Ogrodnik. There we go. There's a guy I know. 78 points. Wings just scored again. Is it Perron? That's up 5-0. So yeah, they actually had balanced scoring in 1983-84. They don't have that right now. Because if you look at Detroit's scoring right now, let's go back over to them. Larkin, 76 points in 75 games. Did he have an assist on this goal? I'm not quite sure. But their next leading scorer, David Perron at 50 points. So
yeah, you need someone to be up there with Larkin and bridge that gap, whether it's a guy like Lucas Raymond or you have a guy like Moritz Seider that really takes that step offensively forward and, has a crazy season like Josh Morrissey is for the Winnipeg Jets this year. He's got 70 points or something ridiculous like that. Now you don't need that, but can you get a guy like Seider to have, 40 points? And then you have a guy like Lucas Raymond pick it up and get 70, 80 points. Because then you have
to be honest, that's what Raymond's going to have to get to, in my opinion, he needs to get up in that impact player range of hovering around 70 to 80 points, like you mentioned, because that's going to help be a difference maker on this team. Now, you could argue, and I think it's a fair thing to say, that he's had a sophomore slump. Seider, though he seemingly started slow, I think he's had actually a very good all-around year.
Oh, yeah.
But there's been some growing pains from both, you could argue. But I think Raymond, scoring-wise, he's looked stronger and more confident on the puck, but the timing is just off.
Yep.
So, but he's still, as of right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth in scoring on the team. So
how many's he got? 18, 19?
16 goals, 24 assists, and he's got a goal tonight, so I think that's up to 17 and 24. But I don't know the assists. I don't have the box score in front of me for tonight's game. So, but no, I mean, going back to where we were started on Kasper and got away. Do you have anything else to touch on with Kasper? I mean, I'm excited to see him. It sucks that he's out tonight because he's banged up, which isn't surprising the way he was throwing the body around the other night, but you got anything else to touch on with him?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, and I think I told you privately. I might have tweeted it too. The 92 looks amazing. It looked amazing on Nemesnikov. It looks even better on Kasper. I really hope he keeps it, just because, I don't know. I guess it's the nostalgia of seeing the 91 and, the 93 of Franzen and the 96 of Holmstrom. It's cool to see a wing player wear a number that's kind of unorthodox. I wonder if, it's something, if there's a reasoning behind it. He wasn't born in 96 or anything like that. So I don't know or I'm sorry, he wasn't born in 92 or anything like
No.
that. So sorry, I got the Holmstrom on the brain there, but he wasn't born in 92, so I don't know why he wore 92. Maybe.
Well, like, you got to go back to training camp because he was wearing it then too. So maybe we can ask Daniela to see what she's been able to find out with that one. It could have been just one of those, that's the number they gave me situations. Since that's what happened with Edmondson, and he rolled along with 3. So
the 3 looks amazing on him too.
Yeah.
So I mean, honestly, like those are the numbers, those solid numbers like that with Edmondson. Like those are like the Nick Lidstrom numbers or like the Bobby Orr numbers. I'm not saying that he's those guys, but
that's fair. Seeing single digit numbers available and on a player, it does bring back, like, that's the old days. I don't want to say old days, but the better times in Detroit. So
absolutely.
But no, I think we've covered enough on the roster and Kasper. I did touch on the Goon squad. I mean, it was hilarious to see them getting under Toronto's skin. Like, now I will caveat, yes, they beat them 5-2, but Toronto did, I hate the term, some load management with a couple guys out there. I think they were without Giordano, Mitch Marner, and one other player that did not dress for this game. But as a whole, I mean, Detroit just seemed to skate better. But what they were also doing better was putting a body on and pissing off guys like they were in Matthews' face. They weren't afraid to go after Luke Shen. They weren't afraid of guys like TJ Brody, and they definitely weren't afraid of Old Man Bunting. And like I mentioned earlier, he got a game misconduct for pretty much just bitching. I think that's what it ended up coming down to. Like I said, I don't know if he spit. People say he did. Can't really tell.
I think the ref got tired of his bullshit and
exactly.
Like, yeah, see you later.
Because he got called for embellishment earlier in the game. I'm torn on if that was actually the right call. I mean, Wallman gave him a good two-handed cross check to the back. So I think maybe it was on the second time that it happened. He went down hard on the first check. I think that was the initial call. But then Wallman touched him again and he like flung himself forward. Maybe it was off that one. I don't really know. He hasn't helped himself out, if you will, Bunting, that is, in terms of not shutting the fuck up. And his coach has called him out on it. And he doesn't like, it's one thing to chirp players. It's another to always bitch about the ref looking for a call. And that is now what he has become known for. Like, you've got talent. There's no denying that. But shut up.
Yep.
So, but it was great though, because you had Edmonds. I thought Edmondson and Seider were going to destroy him, because I think Bunting at one point kicked Seider's stick backwards. That's where the game misconduct came, or the misconduct came in. And Edmondson, as we found out in his little interview with Daniela, does MMA. Did you know that? Did you hear about that?
I did hear that. Yeah.
So now I just want to see the beast unleashed on someone. Seider, it's only a matter of time before I think he cold clocks somebody in the face. And there'd be no better person than Michael Bunting to see him just get absolutely freaking slobbered by one of these guys.
I totally agree. Maybe a Tyler Johnson, but obviously he's not. We're not playing Chicago again.
Yeah, he's really fallen off since leaving Toronto, or
Sidney
Tampa,
Crosby, maybe
Tampa. Huh?
Sidney Crosby, maybe.
If you go back and watch that game, every time Crosby was near the puck, Seider was right up his ass and pissing him off. They got a little chippy at one point. It wasn't as bad as earlier in the year or last season, whichever it was. But no, they were. Seider was in Crosby's grill pretty good again, and I love it. He's starting to piss people off. And if one thing I've noticed this year is he has been really trying to go finish his checks. Have you caught that?
I love it.
And we
haven't seen a lot of the reverse hits this year, though.
No, they wisened up to that one, I would say. But as a whole, they what's the best way to put it? He's been all about getting in there, finishing the check, but not taking himself out of the play to do so.
Yeah.
More often than not. So
I really do think when this team is ready to win, it is going to be a tough team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's going to be similar to those teams in Tampa where they don't take shit. They're not going to just let guys like Stamkos get run over, and there's not going to be a response. There's going to be guys like Patrick Maroon on this team, not him specifically because the game has changed, but guys like Patrick Maroon, guys like Alex Killorn that aren't afraid to mix it up in there, and because even in the playoffs, the games are physical, they're tough. And you have to have discipline, but you also have to stand up for your players when it comes to getting the scrums and stuff like that. So those Tampa teams are really good at that, and I think that Detroit is going to be really good at that when it gets to that point, and even before that, in terms of like playing important games down the stretch, hopefully next season, where you have a chance to make the playoffs.
And that's what's interesting though with Kasper. It seemed like he took over the reins against Toronto that night for the Goon Squad because he wasn't afraid to mix shit up. And then, like I said, with Seider and Edmondson, they came in like two big brothers to help protect him when he was getting into it, Liljegren, and that's where the bunting thing came from. But he, for lack of better words, and you look at teams like Ottawa with Tkachuk, who we love to hate, but that's the type of stuff he does. And it sparks the team. And that's something that I think we've talked about over and over again, that is what they have lacked. Now,
you need guys like that. I know we hate those guys. You need guys like Tkachuk, like Marchand.
But they have to have the skill aspect, because we saw that happen with Giovanni Smith. The skill wasn't there. And then instead he just got penalties from it. Kasper brought the skill aspect the other night. I get it. One game. I'm not trying to go off the deep end with it, but he made shit happen when he needed to in the time that he was out there. So looking forward to the future, that he could end up being a potential game changer if that's the type of thing that he's going to bring night in and night out.
Yeah, I think Carter Mazur will bring a little bit of that too. When he finally does get his first NHL game next year, hopefully.
Oh, Greg would love to have that conversation, because you got Kasper and Mazur out there. If they can replicate what they've done to this point together on the ice, now you've got a mini Bash Bros going on.
And you don't have to do it every night. You have to do it when the other team starts to push back, or you can start it too. It's just a matter of being smart about it and not taking stupid ass penalties, that put your team shorthanded. Because playing a lot of these teams down the stretch, or even next year when you do play Toronto and you do play Boston and you play teams like Edmonton, you put those teams on the power play, man. I mean, I know Boston's power play struggled as of late, but like, you put Edmonton's power play out there, you're gonna give up goals. I don't care if you have the best penalty kill in the NHL, you're still giving up goals.
Yeah, watching McDavid with the puck is it's like art.
Yes, I agree.
But
my roommate Ryan would also agree with that.
he's so fun to watch, and he's also been a blessing to my fantasy team. But all right, so I think we're gonna jump past that. We've beat the horse enough on how this team has looked over the past week. It's been a fine closeout, if you will, for this as we're coming into the end of the season, final 5 games after tonight. But the last thing I want to touch on, and one could argue that he's maybe spurred this team to kind of get back into their winning 3 of 4 and looked better over the last 2 weeks or so. Alex Nedeljkovic. Husso went down with what was assumed to be, I believe, was a lower body injury. And he has been the workhorse and arguably team MVP, depending on what part of the season you want to look at. Ned, on the other hand, was quite the opposite. But since being recalled or getting his emergency recall, he went 5 games, 3-2 record. He had a .925 save percentage over that span, and beating the likes of Pittsburgh, Carolina, and Toronto, while also having a tough loss to Philly and also losing to St. Louis in that span. But was that 5 games for you outside of, he's looked good in Grand Rapids. He did not look good to start this season, which is why he played sparingly over the first 2 months. With what Ned was showing, was that enough for you? And he's 27 years old, to bring him back as your backup next season?
No.
Simple as that.
No. Yeah, no. I think there's better options out there.
Even if he takes less money. He's at $3 million right now. If you cut that down to 2, would you bring him back? Or 1.5, 1.875. There you go.
It depends, because there's guys out there like Tristan Jarry's one guy I would look at. There are other guys that I can't think of at the moment, but there are some free agent goalies out there that you just kind of need really till you get a guy like Kosa ready to back up.
I
It
mean,
won't be next year, I would imagine, but could it be 2 years from now? Kosa should be the starter in Grand Rapids next year.
yeah, he should be. Absolutely. I would
Should
agree
be
with
the
that.
starter in Grand Rapids next year.
And
Now,
I
does
think
that
they played
propel
that
him?
intentionally that way, is because you look at what he's done really up to this point. He hasn't, and Osgood, I think, touched on this after the last game, is you haven't seen the roller coaster, the yo-yoing going on with Kosa, where he's going from Grand Rapids to Toledo and vice versa. He's stayed in Toledo. They've moved Lethaman up. They've moved some guy, Bednar has moved back and forth from Toledo to Grand Rapids. They've let Kosa stay, cook, and do his thing. And so that's why it just seems like the no-brainer that he is now going to make that move to Grand Rapids, right? There's no reason for him not to. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I don't see why he wouldn't at least be the 1A, 1B in Grant. I don't see him backing up in Grant. Well, maybe, I guess, but
yeah, but the biggest thing they're going to say again is he needs whatever's going to get him the most minutes. And we thought that Grand Rapids was going to be a much more competitive team this year. That was quite the opposite of the case.
Next year they should be good, though.
I hope so, because if that's the case, then you get a confident Kosa in there. That's all you can ask for. Because right now with Ned, if you're looking at expiring UFAs or going to be UFAs for next season, Tristan Jarry is your top one out there that's 28 years old. Is he going to command like what you're paying Billy Husso? That's going to be what you're looking at, because do you want to be paying two goalies north of $4 million a year?
Probably not. Yeah, you're right.
I don't think you do. So Tristan Jarry, I mean, it's possible, but I bet that's out because he's 22-11-2 right now in Pittsburgh. He's got a 2.93 and 909 save percentage. He's looking pretty decent. They're also contending potentially for a playoff. Your next UFA, if we're going to go down the list, Laurent Brossoit. I might have butchered that. I know how to say it. I've heard his name, but he's out in Vegas. He's only played 8 games this season. Then you got Aiden Hill. He's 27, also in Vegas. He's played 27 games in a arguable backup role. Now they brought in Jonathan Quick. Let's see. Jonas Korpisalo. He's 29. He'll be, I don't know what his birthday is, but that's a potential option for you.
That's not a bad option either. He's done some backup. Just because Husso's played good this year doesn't mean he's the automatic starter next year, I don't think. And if you bring in a guy like Korpisalo, or you bring in a guy like, I don't know, Freddie Anderson is probably not the kind, but even Freddie Anderson, I mean, he's 33 years old. Could you bring him in to push Husso a little bit?
Maybe. I did my filter on Cap Friendly to be at goalies under the age of 32. So
I don't think the age matters at the backup goalie position.
You sure about that? Because they came into the year with two 26-year-olds.
Maybe you might be right. I mean, that could be the case.
Or 26 and 27 or something like that.
He's 26.
I mean, Husso, he turned 28 in February, so it's 26 and 27 is what they entered the season with.
I do like the Aiden Hill comparison, or I shouldn't say comparison, option. Yeah, he was pretty good in Arizona. He's been good once in a while in Vegas. I think he's been up and down between Henderson and Vegas. So I wouldn't mind that over Ned. I don't know. Is Hellberg totally out?
I wouldn't say no, but I mean, we could have argued that he looked decent in his showing, but as the more playing time he seemed to get, it seemed the worse that he got, much like Ned to start the season. And since Ned's been back, we haven't been talking about Hellberg. And now tonight, Husso's back in net. So
yeah, he got a little exposed. I agree. He definitely.
I'm not saying that he was bad. He was serviceable, but I don't think that's what you want to be relying on as your serviceable backup.
No, definitely not.
So
I agree with that.
It's going to be, if you're like me and restricting it to age, it's slim pickings on the UFA market. So do I see him making another trade, Yzerman? Because that's what he did to get Ned. That's what he did to get Husso. It's possible. But it's that I think is going to be one of the bigger question marks going into next season is what do they do for the backup? I would not be against Ned returning. but it would have to be for less than what he's doing right now. Because you're paying a guy $3 million and he's played in 14 games. That's not okay.
The ideal situation, and I'm not saying next year in particular, but the ideal situation is you get to 2 years from now, Husso's your starter, and Kosa, yes, correct, would be your backup, and that is how you would hope, because then that's the situation of Ben Bishop and Andre Vasilevsky, and then they traded Bishop at the trade deadline. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
To LA, I think it was. So that is kind of where you want to get to. Now, obviously, it takes a little while to get there, and this is kind of why you're bridging the gap. You could be bridging the gap for 1 year, or you could be bridging it for 2 years, which is kind of why I suggested Aiden Hill or potentially even Tristan Jarry. It depends on how much you believe in Husso. Do you believe that Husso's the starter going forward until Kosa's ready to take the reins, or is it a 1A 1B situation until Kosa's ready to become that 1A 1B or potentially backup?
1A 1B for who?
For Husso.
Oh, Husso and whoever they bring in. I mean, we made the thought that Husso and Ned were going to be 1A 1B this season, and then we saw what happened. Like, I'm on record saying this could be the best goaltending tandem duo in hockey, and then didn't come close.
The last decent 1A 1B situation we had here in Detroit was Mrazek and Howard. Early Mrazek. Early Mrazek.
No.
Really? You don't think so?
No, because is it because they took the team to the playoffs, or I mean, that was the tail end of the playoff streak.
I'm talking before Mrazek started being crazy aggressive and playing the puck and turning it over. And
Mrazek was the better option against Tampa that season for sure, because he played he was in there for Game 7, even, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
That was the last glimmer of hope this team had.
Too far. I guess Osgood and Hasek. Then
that was the first one that I was thinking of for best tandem they've had in a while. Arguably, because that group at least won. I mean, I'm not saying that Howard and Mrazek didn't win. They had good regular seasons, but playoff times, that was it. So
yeah, it was different. It was certainly different. I agree.
So consensus: so you're a no. I'm a maybe on Ned returning for a second chance. I wouldn't be against it. I wonder
what Greg would say here, and I know he's not here to listen to this, but he can just fill us in next week.
He can do a record scratch or some shit again, like he did last week's episode. But all right, I think that about wraps it up. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts are just enjoy these last 5 games. Like I said, you know, there's some tough games in there. I mean, the one caveat is you do have some teams that have already clinched, like Dallas and Carolina, I believe, is already clinched, or if they haven't already, they probably will by the time you get to that game on April 11th. And then Tampa Bay, probably by that point, will have already clinched as well. Actually, I think they have clinched already, right? Because we know that Toronto-Tampa Bay series is locked in. So,
yep. All the Atlantic Division teams that were in the top 3 are already clinched. Boston's got Presidents, Toronto, and Tampa. They're now fighting for, I believe, the 2nd spot, but it doesn't matter because they're playing each other. So they're fighting for pride at this point on who's going to be the top 2nd seed or the 3rd seed.
Right. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing. You do have some teams that, that you could probably beat up on. But actually, I shouldn't even say that, because you just beat Montreal. But besides that, I mean, the rest is kind of tough. So you could see a situation where they lose all 5. Hopefully not. And then enjoy the playoffs, because, like I said, there's certainly some rooting interest there. Enjoy the rest of what you see of Edvinsson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other than that, you can follow me on Twitter at SealDog91.
Yeah, no, agreed. Enjoy it while we got what's left, because the Tigers haven't sparked any excitement. I mean, yes, they did win last night. I don't know what they're doing tonight, but they have been scary to start the year. They are not a Boston. Shut up, Tyler. I get it.
Red Sox suck too.
It's been brutal. So no, have fun with these kids that are on the ice right now. That's all we can ask for. I think Edvinsson can only play in 3 or 4 remaining games. I forget where he's at in terms of games played right now after tonight, but he's only got a few more left. You can see Kasper. Hopefully, we get him back for the last couple of games, see what he can do at the NHL level or continue to do at the start. So enjoy it. It's fun. If you don't like them winning, I don't care. It's fun to see this team happy because it means they're playing to the level that we know they can. So you can follow me on Twitter and the sort at RDRyan33. Follow the podcast at Grindline Pod. There's a lot of stuff that Greg usually covers right here that I can't think of everything off the top of your head. But for any of your jerseys and Detroit Red Wings apparel, go to Vintage Detroit. Check them out. Check the shop out on Redbubble. I got Howie's Hockey Tape for discounts there. I think it's Grindline. But other than that, for Tyler, I'm Ryan. You stay classy, Hockey Town.